All right, welcome to video 404 on causes of World War II. This video is going to detail, obviously, with Japan. We're going to start off talking about Japanese imperialism and what caused that in the late early 1900s. We're also going to discuss U.S. responses to that and how that eventually leads to a Japanese attack on Pearl Harbor, Hawaii, on December 7th, 1941, which finally pushes the United States into an active role in fighting World War II. Starting things off, again, Japan, for most of their history, has been an isolated country. They wanted nothing to do with the outside world. The U.S., along with other countries, encouraged them to become an industrialized country, to shift towards an economic plan of industrialism and throughout the 1800s. And by the early 1900s, early 20th century, Japan is an industrial power. However, if you're going to manufacture, which is what industrialism is, you need a lot of resources. And it's a small island country. Japan did not have the resources it needed to become a major manufacturer, industrial country. So just like Great Britain had in the 1600s, and the Belgians did in the 1800s, and the United States did when we expanded beyond our borders in the 18 and 1900s, Japan's going to become an imperial country. They're going to look to build an empire. And they start off by going to war with Russia in 1904, and much to everyone's surprise, they won the war in 1909. Japan continued that by invading Korea. You can see Japan is on this map right here. Korea, there's no North or South Korea at this point, just one Korea, is this little peninsula just to the west of them, which is right here. So they invade Korea in 1910. They're very brutal with the Korean people. They're looking to take over their resources. They follow that up when World War I breaks out. They decide to join with the Allied powers. That was in part because Germany had a naval base on the coast of China. So Japan invaded that naval base as a show of allegiance to the Allied powers, but also as a way to remove one more threat in the Pacific, to try to reduce the amount of opponents they would have in the Pacific. By 1931, they move north out of Korea up into the area of Manchuria, which is rich with a lot of mineral resources. So that's going to really help them to continue to expand. They'll be able to use a lot of those minerals to build things and continue to expand. A few years later, 1936, Japan signs what's called the Anti-Comintern Pact. That Comintern word meaning communism. So that's an allegiance between the Japanese and the Germans to mutually oppose the Soviet Union, which again, Japan had already defeated Russia in 1909. They have since become the Soviet Union. They're communists, so Japan will work with Germany to not work with the Soviet Union. They're not going to trade or work with the Soviet Union. Again, Japan's trying to reduce the number of opponents it has in the Pacific area. Then in 1937, they decide to go ahead and invade China. You'll see this peach color is where Japan invaded in China. And the main area is between the Yellow and Yangtze rivers, which is I believe it's called the North China Plain, their main agricultural area in China. So now Japan has taken over the mineral resources of Manchuria and the food resources of China as well. They continue in 1940, and invade an area called French Indochina, which is this area here, or on a larger map, it's this whole peninsula here between India and China. So again, France had colonized that area, and they'd been there for a few decades, but now Japan's going to go in there and take that over as well. That peninsula includes a variety of countries, including modern-day Vietnam, Laos, Cambodia. We'll talk about those countries when we get to the Vietnam War later on. But now, once they've taken over French Indochina, the United States decides to get involved. And we had been supplying a large amount of oil and steel to the Japanese, which they were using to build and fuel their military and their expansion. In 1940, we issue an embargo, or sanctions, where we stopped trading with Japan, particularly in oil and steel. So that's a huge threat to Japan. Their military is extended well into Manchuria, China, Indochina. They have threats out there from the Soviet Union. If they can't fuel that military, it's worthless, and those countries can all counterattack and destroy Japan. So we negotiate with Japan. We're trying to work out a diplomatic deal that will have them maybe contract and give back a lot of the land they've taken over. Japan is also working on a military solution. They have identified various places in their region where they can gain the minerals and the steel and the oil they need to continue to expand. We are aware of this. We're aware that they're working on a military plan as well, because we actually had the technology to listen and decrypt their radio transmissions to their soldiers and their sailors. So we were aware that the Japanese had actually set a deadline for November 25th, 1941, and if they didn't have a diplomatic solution with the United States at that point, they were going to stop considering diplomacy and focus 100% on military preparations. So that deadline passed. We were aware of that, and we let that deadline pass. 2 weeks later, on December 7th, 1941, Japan initiated a surprise attack on the U.S. naval base at Pearl Harbor. Again, we were surprised by this, not because we didn't know they were going to attack, because we didn't think they would attack there. We had expected Japan to attack one of the weaker, oil-rich colonies of the British or the Dutch in the area. Instead, they decided to attack the U.S. naval presence way out in Pearl Harbor first. We felt like we're very far from Japan, which should create safety, but also why would they want to attack the military strength? We will get to that later on when we talk about World War II, the fighting of that in detail. But again, it was a surprise attack organized by a man named Isoroku Yamamoto. So Isoroku Yamamoto designed this whole attack that was going to have multiple Japanese aircraft carriers sail to within a couple hundred miles of the island of Oahu, where Pearl Harbor is located, and then launch 2 waves of aircraft into Oahu, about 350 planes in total. A variety of different planes were used. The first planes got to the island around 7:40 a.m. on a Sunday morning. Just like today, people sleep in on the weekends. Now, again, the military, they're going to have their watch change around this time period, but people aren't really anticipating this. We did have some radar locations on the island. It was a very new technology. We actually saw some of the Japanese planes flying in on radar, but we were expecting a fleet of bombers to be flying in, so we assumed it was that, American bombers, not Japanese. So these aircraft, as you can see, they have a very detailed plan with a variety of different types of planes. They're going to hit a variety of different locations, primarily focus on the port here, the harbor at Pearl Harbor. And those 2 waves were very, very effective. This map right here shows all the 4 battleships, the largest ships on the base that were destroyed: the California, Oklahoma, West Virginia, and Arizona. There's a variety of all the battleships were at least damaged: Pennsylvania, Maryland, Tennessee, and Nevada. And then a variety of smaller ships were also damaged or sunk. So huge surprise there. Overall, there was about 2,000 American service members died on this day. The majority of them on the USS Arizona that you see right here, which is one of the first ships to sink. We lost about almost 200 planes, and again, a variety of other ships. In fact, the Arizona is seen here. This is a picture that was actually taken, I believe it was President Hoover on board years earlier. But what happened with this ship is a Japanese high-altitude bomber dropped a bomb straight through one of the gun turrets, and it landed in a powder magazine below, and it blew up that magazine, blew a hole straight to the bottom of the ship, so it sunk straight down in Pearl Harbor and is still resting there today as a memorial to all the servicemen that lost their lives on that day. So you can actually take a boat out to this floating dock and walk out and look down on the Arizona. So on the following day, December 8th, President Roosevelt issued an address to the country, and Congress declared war on the Empire of Japan. Just 2 days after that, on December 10th, Japan's allies, Germany and Italy, each declared war on the United States. So now we have basically all the major players involved in World War II. Soviet Union's not in just yet, but they will be shortly. And that is it for the causes of World War II. We'll get into the fighting of World War II next week. Again, please let me know if you have any questions, comments, or concerns. Make sure you get your 10 questions of homework done, and that is it for this week. Take care and be safe.